as you can see, my skills have been improving dramatically. And, you know, some of you might erroneously be thinking that I was trying to play the sax, but actually I was perfecting my duck-billed platypus call. And as you can tell, it's I'm right there with the big ones. I'm now going to impersonate my fat black gentleman in a jazz band who has to dry his forehead with a napkin. There you go. Right. So, let's see. Oh, there's already some of you in here. AJ Rhino, this will be my first time watching the live stream, and I'm happy to say I have time to attend and listen. Oh, very good. Well, we also hope you've got some questions. All questions will be accepted, stupid or otherwise. They won't necessarily be answered, but there you go. AJ Rhino thinks I have to practice 40 hours a day, but you see, again, I think he's thinking about the saxophone. I'm really just, you know, I'm there with the duck-billed platypus call. I'm top 10, no doubt. Right, so I guess, you know, it's a Sunday afternoon for most of you, so I don't expect there's going to be a huge bunch of people here. But just so you know, I've updated the blog a little bit. So on the books I've written, I've added a couple of books that I haven't even bothered to advertise. So this was one of them. This is my bashed-in copy where I make notes and stuff. That's called Confederate Rising. And I think I might be on a mirror. So, oh yeah, that's probably better for you guys. There you go. I was just playing around with the options. So this is just a little novella. It's set in the same world, let's say in the same milieu as the Overlords of Mars series, but like a few hundred years in the future. And you know, there's like people I know kind of got slotted into the thing for fun. So that was just a funny little one. But the main news, of course, oh, Dances with Logos here, the High Priestess of the Kurgan cult. First of all, congratulations on your baby, and I'm glad to see that you're here. So that I'm guessing that's that means that everything went well and that you're good. That's good news. She's producing crusaders. So all hail Dances with Logos. So yeah, the big news is this one. Now, I know it's a little bit washed out, the color, but I like it that way. I like my live streams to have a slightly different look. So you'll see there, the title is Reclaiming the Catholic Church. And I'll read you the subtitle because I'm not sure if that comes out very well. And sort of on a theme because it's got the same logo also at the back as Believe has, which I've got a copy of here as well. There you see at the back of Believe, you've got the same little warrior monk logo. And that's the same one on this one, because that's the imprint of these books. They've also got a similar theme. So this one has got a pretty blunt red cross. This one has got the Martian Lion of Venice, which is also a Catholic symbol, because on the book here it says Pace Marcus Evangelista Meos. So peace, Mark, my evangelist. Now, the subtitle of this, I wanted to keep it, you know, non-controversial as usual. So the subtitle is, the full title of the book is Reclaiming the Catholic Church, the True History of Vatican II and the Visible Remnant of the Real Catholic Church, now that the Vatican is a pederast-infested hive of imposters. That's right on the cover, and it sort of goes downhill from there. Now, this is not light reading, unlike Believe. There you go. For those of you who have read Believe, you can compare the two. That's... there you go. Let's just see if you can, I don't know if you can see this very well. There, if I put a bit of separation. So this, 98 pages. This, 530 pages. And if you go on Amazon, you can see the table of contents, which is pretty extensive because it runs to, let's see, from page 5 until page 10. So there's 5 pages of tables of contents, and you know, if you guys request it or whatever, I'll read you some of the titles just to give you an idea of what's inside it. But it covers what Catholicism is or was, what happened to the infiltration, and you know, all of that sort of stuff. So it goes through every one of the Vatican II documents. So for those of you that have been wondering, but what is the heresy and why is it heretical? Well, there you go. You're going to have all the details that you want, and you're going to have the details of each heresy in each document. Now, Inter Mirifica is the only document that technically doesn't have direct heresy in it, but given the context, it's certainly promoting heresy. So that's where we are. So let's see if you guys have got any questions. Start shooting them now. I will scroll back and try and catch all of them. Let's see, where are we? Unsolicited sax should be illegal. That's from Slap Weasel. But as I've mentioned, I wasn't playing the saxophone. I was perfecting my duckbill platypus call. So there you go. I'm winning. Lord save me. Yeah, it looks like you're all appreciating my music. That's great. Same, although I met him. Oh, my first time catching a live Kurgan stream as well. Oh, good. Oh, Scully. How are you, sir? It's nice to see you here, sort of metaphorically speaking. But yeah, that's a cool guy. The call to arms has been sounded. Sort of more like one of the trumpets of the end times, I think. But yeah. Okay, let's quickly see if there's any... somebody likes the font. Yep, I've always been partial to that font. I found it many years ago, and I've sort of used it on a... I've used it also on this one, actually. It's the same font or the title of this little book, Confederate Rising, which, as you can assume, is it's not going to have a lot of politically correct ideas. I think one thing that's a cool little bit, because I try to, you know, the Overlords of Mars series are going to a lot of depth about the world on which those things exist, which is really our world, set in the early 90s with all sorts of technology and bases on Mars that people don't know about and so on. And at the beginning of this little book, I think it's too bright. Maybe, I don't know if you can see. Well, at the beginning of this book, I've got a timeline starting from the birth of Christ and quickly taking you through to AD 2396, which is when this thing happens. And there's like a false history of like what people think history is, and like the false narrative of history, which is the First, the Second World War, that sort of stuff, and the actual history of what the real technology is going on. So that's an interesting little insight into my brain, if you like, of what I think is sort of happening. You know, there's aliens sort of in here. Not the aliens are not really a big part of it. It's mostly a war about, those of you that have ever played Traveller will understand. So it's about the Solomani Empire's infighting between what is the actual empire and a confederation of planets, hence Confederate Rising. What name do I publish under? I publish under my name. There you go. Just in case you're not aware. There. Oop, can you read that? There you go. But usually if you just do a search on Amazon for my surname, which you can see on this book, there you go. That's it. You'll see all, or if you go to my blog, again, if you're on Social Galactic, you've got the link to my blog. If you're not on Social Galactic, I've put my link to my blog various places, so you should be able to find it. Okay. Good evening, Kurgan Immortals. Okay, first question, David Lawrenson. Does the name the West on our civilization specifically refer to the civilization that arose in the Western Roman Empire, or is it a later geographical reference? Is Orthodoxy thus excluded from the West? Good question. I don't know the actual details, but that sounds reasonable to me. You know, there was the Western and the Eastern empires, of course, and Western civilization is civilization. I mean, the Eastern Orthodox didn't really do much to civilize the world. They were pretty insular. I talk about this. There's a lot of also interesting appendixes. Let me just give you that. That might be interesting. Oh, and by the way, for the moment, this is only out in paperback, and that's probably out. It'll stay for a while. Those of you that have bought my other non-fiction books, I just happen to have this on my desk because I was looking at covers and stuff. But so that one, also 500 plus pages. So this one and the Systema book all my non-fiction books are really only available in paperback. There's a reason for that, which is that I have a lot of footnotes, a lot of little gimmicky, again, I think the light is a bit too bright for you guys to see what I'm saying, but there's like cartouches in here, there's footnotes galore, there's tables, all stuff that, and you know, similarly with this one, you've got a lot of footnotes, there's a lot of links in here, but what I did for the links in this one is I've put the links in a pretty short, they're generally short links, so they're easy to type out. So if you're, and also, I think the paper copy is better to have as a reference because it's got a lot of various references you probably want to go back to more than once. So I'm just going to give you a quick rundown of the appendixes just to give you an idea. So Appendix 1 is the Mino Pecorelli list of Freemasons. This is a pretty involved thing because I go through the history of how the church was infiltrated and who was in it and you know how the Freemasons did it, which is intimately tied to the history of Italy, which is Byzantine in itself, and then the history of the Freemasons is even more Byzantine. So it's a really, not even conspiracy theory, these are the factual things that are known, that are court documents and so on to prove all the stuff, is already so convoluted that it's really difficult to make sense of. But I think I did a fair job in this book, in one of the chapters, to basically give you a summary, kind of a rundown of what's happened. And the Mino Pecorelli list was a list by a journalist that got killed. He was shot for it, pretty much, which essentially, well, whether he was shot for this or other things related to Andreotti, which was the Prime Minister of Italy at the time, who knows. But it was the list of Freemasons, confirmed Freemasons, that were already in the Vatican. This is when Pope John Paul I, who only lasted 30 days before he supposedly was killed, was put out. So that's Appendix 1. Appendix 2 is just the first part of the J. Dyer debate after report, because in the J. Dyer debate after report, which is on the blog, it's a really long thing. Don't worry, that's not in here, because it would be 30 pages. So I archived it, and I just gave a link, and I said, those of you that are interested, go read the link, everything's in there. But the first part of my blog, when you go to the archive function, is sort of cancelled out, because I have this pop-up, which I don't know how to get rid of, and I'm trying to get people now to sort out my website. And so that pop-up sort of covers the first part of that after report, so that's what that appendix is. Appendix 3 is Quo Primum, which basically states that if you try and ever change the Mass in any way, shape, or form, you're a heretic, and you should be, you know, the Mass becomes invalid. Appendix 4, and so Appendix 3, Quo Primum, is the actual papal encyclical, so you can read it for yourself. Appendix 4 is the split with the East, papal primacy, and why the Eastern Orthodox are in error. So there you go, there's a little commentary on that. Appendix 5 is Cum ex apostolato officio, which is one of the bases for saying why the fake popes are fake popes and why nobody should listen to anything they say. Appendix 6 is on purgatory, which explains how purgatory works, where it comes from, how it's biblically related, blah, blah, blah. And Appendix 7 is Mystici Corporis, which was one of the last papal encyclicals done by Pope Pius XII, which explains the body of Christ. That's what it stands for in Latin, and explains what the Catholic Church is, how it functions, who is the head of the Catholic Church, which is actually Jesus Christ, and how the vicar of Christ on earth, the Pope, is just a worldly representative and is not the head of Christianity, which is one of the accusations that, you know, fakers, deceivers, idiots, ignorants throw at Catholics. Anyway, I'll go carry on reading through the rest of you. You've got a few of you in here now, 14. Let's see. Ave Logos Dancer, yeah, very good. Thick tome. Yes, it is a thick tome because there's a lot of ground to cover. Again, let me give you a quick rundown just of the titles of the chapters so that you get an idea. So, Chapter 1 is the real Catholic Church and its beliefs, so you get an idea of what actual Catholicism is. Chapter 2 is the enemies of the Church, their names are legion, and it takes you through the permanent instruction of the Alta Vendita, which starts off with the Carbonari, the Freemasons. These guys are all interrelated, and their intention was to destroy the Catholic Church, and there are documents that prove this again. Chapter 3, the Specter of Vatican II and the Code of Canon Law. So it explains why the Code of Canon Law was put together, what the Code of Canon Law is, and why it is essentially the last bastion of impregnable Catholicism that will pretty much never be destroyed, because, and it was intended to be that. And you'll see why it's such an important document, because it's not like a legalistic thing that you can argue. It's based on Roman law, it's not arguable, and they spent years they spent something like 14 years to put it together to make sure that it didn't contradict any of the other dogmas of the church, going back to all the documents of the last 2,000 years. So an incredible amount of work. And then after it was published, they spent the next 30 years just answering any priest or any cleric that had a query that said, oh, but how does this work with that? Is there a clash? And guess what? In those 30 years, how many changes they had to make to the document to make sure it was in line with Catholicism throughout the ages? One tiny little change on Code of Canon Law 1099, which has nothing to do with the stuff it's related to marriage. And it was a minor change. So it is one of the most hardcore, strict documents of Catholic dogma. That it is the pinnacle, let's say. Vatican II is chapter 4, its creators and heresies. And I mention some of the guys that created Vatican II, some of the heretics, how it came about. There is a really interesting link to a guy called Jules Isaac, and I've archived that link, so you can go and see it. I didn't put it in the book because it would be too long and too detailed, and plus it was, I don't want to, you know, I use work of other people, but fair use and so on. I didn't want to copy the whole article, but it's really interesting. And then I take you through every one of the 16 documents and point out heresy in every one of the documents. Chapter 5 is the Code of 1917, Canon 188, Part 4, and Sede Privationem. So Chapter 5 is really the core of the code that makes us Sede Privationists and that makes us continuing to be Catholics as opposed to everybody else who's faking it. Chapter 6 is the objection of the churchians and the impostors, and here I take you through the type of objectors, the modus operandi of the deceivers, and there's only about 11 things that they always do, the objections themselves, and then the objectors, where it's probably those of you that enjoy flame wars, you will like that because I take apart, and Barnhart is the only one that I sort of go a little bit easy on because I think she's genuinely misguided. I talk a little bit about Jay Dyer, but I don't spend a lot of time on him because I've already taken him apart on the blog. I mentioned George Bergoglio, John Pontrello, and John Salza. And on John Salza, I do spend 30 pages taking him to little pieces. Chapter 7 is why the Latin Mass matters and why the Novus Orcus version is invalid. Chapter 8, the state of things now and the steps to take. And Chapter 9, final conclusions and considerations. And you've also got some resources to Catholic churches, websites, books, and so on. And there's a bunch of other stuff quoted in here. So that's why it's a tome. That's why it's 530 pages. My editor, who I won't mention by name nor by any other association, but she's a really cool lady. And she's not officially Catholic as far as I know, but she told me that, because I said, look, just give me your, thanks for the editing, but now give me your honest, brutal opinion. And she goes, I really liked it. I was never bored. And it's kind of the way that you write is funny. And there's some points where you just sort of think, okay, what's he going to say next? So hopefully it's kind of like Believe, same sort of style, same writer. So, yep, Warrior Monk is the imprint. Thanks for the laugh. Oh my goodness, I found a pendant with that symbol of an antique store. I guess you're talking about the Martian lion. Well, you know what they say? Twin flames dances with logos. Yeah, it's the Martian lion. It's the... it's sort of like, you see, Venice is so cool because they were independent from the Byzantine Empire, the Roman Empire, and the church, and they've got like this lion that's kind of a saint that's also angelic and it's got wings, and Mark is their prophet. Their Saint Mark is named after the patron saint of Venice, and it's a cool city. Everybody should see that once at least before they die. Oh, and here we have Western Reckoning, which, by the way, sir, we are going to have a chat. That's why I got this old software up and running, and hopefully it's going to work well. And he says orthodoxy is excluded from Western civilization. So there you go, David. That answers your question, which makes sense, like I said. When will we be able to order the book? You can order the book right now. You can order the book online. You just go to Amazon, type in, I don't know why, if you just type in my name, it doesn't seem to appear. So either go on the link that should be in the description of this live stream. I'm not sure where that appears. Or just type in the actual, you don't have to type in the whole subtitle, just type in Reclaiming the Catholic Church and my surname, Filotto, and it will pop up. It's, it's $30, it's $29.99. This one was like $9.99 or something like that. But, this took a few years to put together and a lot of research, and there's 530 pages, so I don't think it's expensive for a reference book. Does Australia's wildlife, what? Price God? What? I don't know what that meant, but okay. Very good, thanks. That's Scully replying. Good. Kurgan, thoughts on Turkey changing the Hagia Sophia into a mosque? I thought they already had. We just have to change it back once we retake it. But yeah, it's, I think Satanism and is accelerating. I think that the Prince of Lies knows he's running out of time. So, does Australia's wildlife prove God has a sense of humor? I don't know. You'd like to think so, but then he also created, apparently, the Australians, unless that was the work of the enemy. And I don't think you can say that's funny. That's a pretty nasty joke to play on the rest of us, making Australians. What name do you publish under? I've already answered that. Okay. If you mean the Aboriginals, then absolutely. Yeah, okay. Belarus Ukrainian civilization is a subset of Western civilization. Even though they have significant Orthodox population, the West-East divide goes along the Dnipro River. Okay, interesting. I'm not sure about these things, so I'm learning with you guys. Oh, Seleucus Nicotobear, he had a long conversation with this moron on Social Galactic, who was trying to say that all organized religion is Satanist. Another pure example of a gamma and a sophist. It was actually really interesting because, like I said, in this book, I actually take you through the modus operandi of the gammas. The gamma is one of the modus operandi, actually, itself. And I take you through sophistry, appeal to false authority, redefinition of words, moving the goalpost. And it's really interesting how quickly, I think Social Galactic, partly because of the clean speech, partly because the people that stick there are actually kind of serious as a result of the clean speech as well. I know that a lot of the ilk, for example, a lot of the Dread ilk have done away, like, we're not going to go on Social Galactic because, it's too clean speech and whatever. And I'm like, well, in a way, that's a very interesting social experiment because it's sort of forcing a slightly higher level of conversation. And it tends to remove the gammas from there. It also tends to clarify thought. And there's a lot of people on there that have thought about several things quite a lot. I know that I lost about 15 or, I don't know, maybe 20 subscribers after I did my Flat Earthers are idiots. And good riddance, if you're a flat earther and you want to carry on listening to the stream and being on the channel, that's fine. Just don't bring up flat earth or try argue with me on it because I'll just ban you. There's nothing to argue about. Unless you've refuted every single point that, Professor Dave has done in the videos that I've linked to in those videos, don't even bother, okay? You want to believe in the flat earth? Hide it from me. That's the way to get along with me, all right? Kind of like if you're a homosexual, I got no issues with you, just don't try and put that stuff in my realm, my world. No, not really going to be accepted. In fact, I'll probably be more tolerant of a homosexual that is willing to argue the point or discuss it honestly, than a flat earther, because I haven't met one yet that's willing to argue it honestly, and that's why they are flat earthers, because they can't. Indeed. So this guy that was arguing that all religion, and he was trying to redefine his words, he was trying to redefine Satanism and whatever, the gamma side, indeed. Is this the overall style of this book as a conversation or as belief? It is pretty much. I mean, it's more structured and because I have to deal with various number of things. But there's some really nice tables, for example, on the number of people that were killed. Seems like you can't see this stuff due to the... Yeah, well, you can sort of roughly see. There's tables there on the Inquisition, on the actual numbers of people killed in the Inquisition and how long it lasted and so on. And so, I don't know, I'm just gonna maybe pick a random thing. Yeah, tell me some chapter or whatever that you want me to read at random, and we'll see. I'll just pick one at random and read, I don't know, a paragraph if you guys want, and that way you can get a sense of the style, I guess. Michael, Western Reckoning is replying to Michael that he's always understood the West and Eastern divide as religious. West is Catholic, East is Orthodox. That would put Ukraine in the East with Russia. That's from Clash of Civilizations. There you go. See, it's interesting. Western Reckoning is a millennial, and he's obviously learning a little bit of history through Clash of Civilizations, you know, programs, I guess, games, I don't know what they're. Going to watch the replay. Have to go now. Have fun and claim heads. Okay, good. Have a good one. Woolly Ram says, I do recall listening to an Orthodox priest while I was searching and thought it was important to stress that Orthodoxy is an Eastern religion. Make of that what you will. Well, it is. It is an Eastern religion. And they didn't even stray very far east because it was Catholics that went to Japan to try to convert them over there. Without going into the credibility of EMJ, what do you think of his interpretation of Logos? I don't think of anything at all of EMJ. E. Michael Jones is a deceiver, a liar, and a fraud. And I don't care if he says that the sky is blue. It's completely irrelevant. As far as I'm concerned, the word Logos refers to Jesus Christ, the Word, or you could think of it as the Word, God, the aspect of God that is Jesus Christ. So, you know, E. Michael Jones is a fraud. He's a grifter, and he's got absolutely nothing of value other than deceit, lies, and he is just like Jordan Peterson, another guy that's lying and deceiving. Ignorance, people that don't know any better. Young men that didn't have a father followed, you know, Jordan Peterson, who's a fucking meth head. You know, it's pathetic. Do not follow E. Michael Jones. He's lying. Educate yourself about what Catholicism is. E. Michael Jones promotes and promulgates Vatican II. According to Canon Law, anyone who promotes heresy, which Vatican II absolutely is, confirmed, and that's why I wrote this book, so you got all the details, is themselves a heretic. That is dogmatic rule of the Catholic Church and always has been. It's in Cum Ex Apostolato Officio specifically, that was written in the 1400s or 1500s, and it's in Canon Law, which refers to various documents throughout the ages. E. Michael Jones is a heretic. He's not a Catholic. He's not a teacher of any sort. He's a fraud and a liar. So I don't know why you're asking me about him. I think I've expressed with some clarity how I feel about him and what I think of him. Your book is going to set off a storm. I'm going to get a copy as soon as possible to stay ahead of the curve. It will set off a storm, but it's probably going to be a quiet storm because I bet you anything that people like E. Michael Jones, people like Tay Marshall, you know, Taylor Marshall, Dr. Taylor Marshall, and Dr. E. Michael Jones, and Dr. James White, which I did a video about, although he's a Protestant, so he doesn't even begin to count, and Michel Voris, or Michael Voris, you know, the gay guy who pretends to be a Catholic. All those guys, they're going to avoid this book like the plague. It's going to be, again, similar to what Jordan Peterson did with Vox's book about Jordanetics. Kind of avoided talking about it, you know, just like made sure nobody knew it existed for a long time until you couldn't avoid it anymore, and then he tried to make a joke out of it. And that's what these guys will do. They're going to try and avoid it completely. And eventually, you know, it is a thorn in their side. I do know that you guys on here, the guys on Social Galactic, the people I know personally that are buying it and that are promoting it. So, you know, please do help. Promote this video, promote the book. If you read it, if you bought it and you liked it, please write me a review. If you think it was crap and it was a doorstop, do yourself a favor and don't bother with the review. Just because I know this is going to have a lot of pushback. So they're going to try and squash it. So, you guys, if you want to help, that's what you want to go for. That would be helpful. Michael Picard says, Western reckoning, would you consider Greece as part of Eastern or Western civilization? Belarus, Ukrainians have had a Catholic history under the Commonwealth and Union of Brest. Okay, I don't think it's, I don't know. I don't know enough historically. I don't know if there is an official delineation and then who defines that delineation. But essentially, Western civilization would be Catholicism, and it would have to be Catholic. So I would consider that those parts of Ukraine that were Catholic would be part of Western civilization, even though they're pretty far east. And I would consider Greece probably part of Eastern civilization mostly because they're Orthodox. Having said that, Greece is a particularly unique example because, the foundation of Western civilization is not just Catholicism, but underlying that is the Greco-Roman philosophies, and therefore you could consider Greece straddling both worlds to a certain extent. The Australian Abos do have an interesting mythology. Have a look into their concept of the dream time. There's another really interesting thing about the Aborigines, and that is that apparently they are or were telepathic. They joined, they would meet at certain places without any method of communication at certain set times that were not due to astronomical observation or anything. It was just like they felt it, oh, we have to go there, and then they would meet up there. Again, those of you that are, think that telepathy is nonsense or some conspiracy theory, I suggest you look at a 2-hour video called No More Secrets by Michael Persinger, who explains scientifically what telepathy is and how it works. And by the way, it does work because they've used it in the military to communicate with a submarine, a nuclear submarine under Arctic ice. They hooked up 2 people to all sorts of ECGs and blood volumeters, every possible thing you could be hooked up to, they hooked them up to. And they got the one guy on land, interestingly enough, to think violent thoughts towards the guy that's in the submarine. And the machinery they were hooked up to recorded, a spike. So what they could do using this methodology, they communicated using Morse code, because you could send a short violent thought or a long violent thought, and there you have Morse code. So it was successful. I don't remember where I found this out. Might have been Freedom of Information Act, I don't recall. It was a while ago. I mean, I knew about this years ago. So speaking of homosexuals, has anyone here met one that has mended his ways and turned to God? I have, actually. And this was long before I was any kind of a Christian. This was in South Africa. There was a guy who'd only been with men. And he was sort of, to me, he was an acquaintance. He was sort of somewhat of a family friend from my mother's side of things. Nice enough guy. As far as I'm aware, he was abused as a teenager. And however, later in life, in his 30s, he found a woman that he became attracted to, and eventually he had sex with. And once he did that, he was like, oh my God, I was so wrong. I didn't even realize what I was missing, So, a lot of these guys are sadly unfortunates that have had bad stuff happen to them, or, so I do have compassion for them, of course, until they try and mess with a kid. Then my attitude is that they should be burnt at the stake. Was the Inquisition successful in any of its goals? It was, in the extent that, that was from Tommy Hill, it is in that extent that they sort of got rid of the marranos and moricones, the fake Catholics and the fake Catholics that were Jews and the fake Catholics that were actually Muslims, that were still communicating with the Muslims. It was necessary in order to make the Reconquista work. But, it was very anemic, very, very anemic. I mean, they burnt less than 3,000 people in a period of over 200 years. And, how many women? Here's the thing. So if you just type this up, I'm a little bit behind, so this will appear later in the stream. But your best guess of how many women were burnt at the stake in the whole of the Spanish Inquisition for witchcraft, okay? Your best guess. Just type it out in the chat. Your best guess of how many witches, so-called witches, were burnt at the stake. Keep in mind that we've been told that, if a woman rejected the advances of some sick freak that had an in with the Catholic Church, they would be burnt at the stake. All the hot women that didn't want to bang like fat priests, they would be burnt at the stake. What is the number that you think, were burnt at the stake for witchcraft? I'll answer that in a little while. Remind me so that when I go back in the chat, I'll find out. And also, if you want to take a guess, how many were burnt at the stake for sodomy? Yeah? Take a guess at those two numbers. Witchcraft, how many women? Sodomy. How many poor, innocent gay men were burnt at the stake for sodomy? We'll come back to it in a minute. I'll give you guys a chance to guess at a number. Don't Google it, just your impression. That's why it's important. It's your genuine, honest impression. Don't try to second guess as if you'd been asked that cold without knowing anything about me, what would have you guessed? All right? And we'll come back to it in a little bit. Considering the immense income Jordan B. Peterson has, why has he not upgraded to cocaine yet? That was from Woolly Ram. I think because he's a cheap bastard. I get that sense from him. He doesn't dress particularly well. His photograph of him, when he tells you clean your room, and there was a still picture of one of his videos, and the back of his house looks like a fucking tip. Honestly, I think the trash in my bins is better organized than that. And cleaner. Actually, there was like dirt. It just looked wrong. Woolly Ram, no, I avoid them more than masked people. I think that was about the homosexuals. This is nationless nationalist. Well, brother in arms, are you a Venetian too? Great listening while I rewire my house. Thank you, sir. Oh, you're most welcome. Cactus Eat a Bear. What is canon law? An extension of the Bible? Just suggestions or from God? Oh, Cactus Eat a Bear, you disappoint me. You dirty little Protestant. Let me educate you. Canon law is all derived from the Bible. Essentially, what canon law is, if in the Bible, for example, in the Bible it says that you should not divorce. Jesus says that divorce is not cool. And divorce was only allowed in the Old Testament because, there were hard-hearted Jews or whatever, and it was just kind of like to make you survive or whatever. But, it's not cool. So from that, then there's a rule. I know you're really asking. I'm not having a go at you. I'm trying to explain it. So there's the rule about no divorce. The Catholic Church has always had the rule that divorce is not allowed. Why? Because it's in the Bible. Another rule, for example, is about why priests are celibate. Again, because there's a historical element which confuses it as well. But if you just look at the Bible, Paul basically says, oh, well, a priest should have his wife and kids and his house in order. And Jesus says those men who are, for whatever reason, not fit or able or supposed to, marry and have kids, should dedicate their life to God and make their whole life about God. Now, obviously, it's quite clear that between these two examples, the one that dedicates his whole life to God is probably going to do a better job. And essentially, the Catholic Church has said, if you're going to be a priest, now that we've got enough of us, now that there's enough Catholics, that you don't have to get the first Tom, Jim, and Harry that wants to be a bishop, then they're going to have to be celibate. Also, traditionally in the church, once you became a bishop or a priest or whatever, you would stop having sex with your wife. And this all goes back to the views that were already in the Old Testament to do with purification, dealing with God, and so on. If you want to understand that aspect of things a lot better, I strongly suggest you listen to, unauthorized, Professor Rachel Fulton Brown has got a series on medieval history. Listen to volumes 2 and 3. And as in 2, it really explains to you why the Catholic Bible is the most correct version of the Bible, and why all the lies of the Protestants about Catholics not wanting people to read the Bible and so on. And in volume 3, in chapter 3, she explains how the liturgy works and why Mary is such an important symbol in Catholicism, because it's connected to the Psalms, and it shows you how the Psalms work with what the Protestants call Marianology, and why the Protestant destroyed all the statues of Mary. But the thing is, in medieval times, the average Catholic understood exactly which psalm referred to what, why it referred to Mary, why Mary is considered, the Queen of Heaven and the Mother of God. That's from the Bible. It's not, and by the way, that's not even canon law. That's just dogmatic principle of the Church. It's in the Bible, because if you look at Ave Maria Gratia Plena, the Hail Mary prayer. And by the way, Dances with Logo posted a screenshot in the argument with the gamma-sided idiot that Nicator Bear was arguing with. She posted a screenshot, actually. I don't know if it's possible, but if Dances with Logos is still there, like, I have to try and find. It's brilliant. It shows you how the Hail Mary prayer stems directly from biblical statements, because when Mary was first spoken to by the angel, it was said, "Hail Mary," So an angel is saying "Hail Mary." It's reserved for royalty, that kind of appellation. So there's so much like history and connection to the Bible in Catholic thought that the average Protestant has got no clue of, and like the communists, they've destroyed the link to it. So it's just like out of nowhere, all of a sudden you get a German guy who just invents the Bible and he rips out 7 books of it. Why does he rip out those particular 7 books? That, Rachel Fulton Brown also goes into that a little bit. Really good. So I strongly suggest you listen to that. But canon law is basically the formalization of these things. And originally canon law was spread out over 2,000 years, because it was like, well, let's say a priest comes up and says, well, this guy raped a 16-year-old, and, we're in the year 1500, and it's okay to have sex with a 16-year-old in the 1500s, but she says he forced her, and then he forced her to get married. But now in the Old Testament, it says if you have sex with a girl, then you have to marry her. But now the girl is saying she was forced. Is that good or bad? Or, what's the rule? And unlike the Orthodox, and certainly unlike the Protestants, who have no rules at all, except like, I'll interpret it whichever way I want, the Catholic Church has always had rules. And they said, well, let's go through the Bible. What does the Bible say? What does this doctor of the church think? What does that doctor of the church think? Oh, well, because the doctors of the church, unlike the Talmudians, of the little hats, the doctors of the Catholic Church explained very clearly where they got what from, how they assumed what, and from where. And it always goes back to the Gospels. It always goes back to the Bible. So it's not like, oh, well, we're going to choose this thing on Tuesday and that other thing on Wednesday. Plus, we formalized it. In Catholicism, you cannot have a rabbi telling you, oh, well, you can rape children under the age of 3, and another rabbi saying, well, actually, that's probably not a cool idea. No, in Catholicism is, no, rape is wrong, end of. And it applies to everybody. There is no argument. There's no like priest that argues with another priest. No, it's one rule for all. And that's what Catholic canon law is. It's the formalization of those rules that all stem from the Bible. So it's like, well, what do we do when X happens? What do we do if this happens? Now, some of these rules become pretty rarefied in the sense that, well, you've got rule A and then you've got rule B, which are pretty clear. No divorce, no adultery. Okay, cool. And then you get to like, if you've got no divorce and if you've got no adultery, well, great. And if marriage, the purpose of marriage is to have children, then clearly abortion is wrong. Now, that's a second stage thing, right? And then you can get a third stage, a fourth stage, but it's all logically supported on the foundation of the gospel. So the Protestants have just cut the legs out of all that, and they don't know it. That's why they've got no rules, because they don't. And again, in the Bible itself, when it says, oh, well, I don't want the authority of a pope or the authority of a priest to tell me what. But in the Bible itself, Jesus himself says, that you have to take I can't remember if it was Jesus or one of the other guys says, well, but you have to, how do I know what the truth is unless a man with authority tells me? That's why you have bishops. That's why you have priests. Does that mean the priests are infallible? No. Does that mean the bishops are infallible? No. Does it mean that the Pope is infallible? No. The Pope is only infallible when he's acting in the dogmatic position of the Church for the dogmatic position of the Church. The Pope himself can be a pederast. It doesn't matter. He's not an infallible human being. We're all fallible. But because of the supernatural protection of Jesus Christ, the Pope is deemed infallible. Again, it's a logical procession. I hope I've answered your question, Cactus Eater Bear. If not, say so, because I'm willing to talk about this, and I know there's a lot of confusion on these things. So, what are masked people, Scully? People who wear masks. Those few here in Denmark that walk around with COVID masks. Oh, Denmark seems pretty based then if they don't walk around with masks. That's very good. Western Reckoning, I think, this is Michael Peck, our disagreement comes from a different understanding of civilization. I think we can both agree that Russia is separate from the West, though. Yeah, okay, they're still arguing about what Western and Eastern civilization is, I suppose. Woolly Ram says that there are plenty of the masked people here in Israel. It's annoying to watch elders that should know better succumbing to fear. Well, just remember, most people are idiots is a truism. DPM says, EMJ was a hero of Catholic faith until Kurgan opened my eyes. Lacking father figure was key in this. Well, DPM, I'm very sorry for your not having a father figure, but yeah, that's, just be careful who you listen to. And do your own research. Read your own books, That, guys, honestly, I've written 3 non-fiction books. They're on completely different subjects. The first one was on the face on Mars, Martians, what the history of humanity. The second one was on a martial art that I trained and taught. And the third one is on Catholicism. Completely disconnected topics. But on each one of these things, I spent years reading this stuff and understanding it and getting to some level of ability in it. And now we've come to the numbers of how many witches were burnt at the stake. 11, 5, 10, 4 whole witches, 33 Illuminati confirmed, 15, 200, 2, 10 witches are burning, sodomy 123. Okay, the total number of witches, I believe, was 12. And the total number of sodomite that were burnt at the stake, every single one of them of which was for having sex with an underage boy, 165. Not quite the scourge of pretty women and poor innocent homosexuals that you've been taught, is it? And as for how many marranos, unrepentant Jews that were burnt at the stake, again, I can't remember the number off the top of my head, but it's something like under 10 or whatever, 12 or something like that. Again, not quite the first Holocaust that it's been presented as. 9 sodomites are flaming. That's a nice Christmas line. We drowned a few in Iceland, Scandinavia. 15, 60 nights sodomites burning. 8 heretics are roasting. Okay, so there you go. It's interesting, though. It's an interesting topic, the Inquisition. Ordered book just now. Well, thank you very much. My cousin works at the Department of Defense. He used telepathy to knock something off a shelf. Okay, that's actually telekinesis, but okay. Woolly Ram says the kids of preachers, rabbis, and imams are always at least a little messed up. Spiritual leaders do their kids no favors by having to double duty. Exactly. That is a very solid point, actually. Yeah. Noventilion asks a question. In Systema, you talked about recalling past lives. How does that fit with Christianity? Officially, as far as I know, with Catholicism, it's anathema. They don't believe in reincarnation or anything like that. However, I need to ask my priest actually about that, because there are rules in the Catholic Church that are worldly rules to protect you. Like, for example, the Catholic Church has a rule for, and this is a very different thing. I'm going to make an example. They've got a rule about dueling. It's a mortal sin if you jewel. And it's quite correct that it is a mortal sin if you jewel, because it's a sin of pride. They've also got a rule that only ordained priests can be exorcists. But again, that's a worldly rule. In reality, anybody could perform an exorcism. And certainly you could be one of the minor orders before. An exorcist was one of the 4 minor orders, which meant that you didn't have to be celibate yet, you didn't have to be a priest. You were in preparation to become a priest. So it was assumed that you would. But if you stopped that process, you wouldn't lose the fact that you were an exorcist, but you wouldn't obviously be able to become a priest, but you would still be able to be married and whatever. The reason for that is because being an exorcist is extremely dangerous and extremely unwise for 99.999 periodical of people to try and do. So the church tries to protect souls and protect people. So they say no to that. However, biblically, there is certainly passages that are at least indicative of something akin to reincarnation, a transmigration of the soul. And I cannot differentiate between reincarnation or transmigration of the soul, or whatever you want to call it. That was a Judaic concept that existed. When I say Judaic, I mean pre-Christian, pre-Jesus Christianity. Yeah, I don't mean the Pharisaic, Talmudic Jews. So, and there is quite an interesting book written by quite a crazy woman. I don't know if I have if I can see the title from here. Probably not. I think it's called Incarnation of Christianity, by a woman whose name, weirdly enough, I remember, called Elizabeth Clara. She was a complete freak and a crazy woman, but she reproduced a little book that was written by a Russian guy that traveled to India, who apparently found evidence in the ancient Hindu scrolls of Jesus having traveled to India. There's also a CD done by a guy who was like born evangelist or something. It's an American guy. I can't remember the name of the CD, but it was great. I was gonna do a CD on that. I was gonna do a video on it myself, a full film actually, whatever. But then when I found out this guy had done it, and I thought, oh, the idiot stole my idea. And then I watched his DVD, and I was like, nope, he got the first, and he's done an awesome job. So let me just shut the fuck up. Good for him. But apparently Jesus was in India, and there is some evidence of this. And again, there is in the Bible, there is evidence for what I think is reincarnation, and I don't think that it actually goes against any dogmatic principles of actual sins, of mortal sins of the church, to believe that. In that, I think one lifetime is a very short amount of time for you to figure out all the errors that you have made, and so on and so forth. And certainly my personal experience with remembering past lives has been overwhelmingly positive and helpful to leading me to eventually, years later, to Christianity. So I don't see it as a negative, but that's my personal belief, which is neither here nor there. Officially, the Catholic Church does not recognize reincarnation, as far as I know. Cactus Eater Bear says, I see, very good, thanks a million. I'll rewatch Prof. Brown's videos now that I understand. Specifically part 2, to give you a history of the Bible, which is sort of explains to you why the Protestant Bibles are rubbish. But it's part 3 where you really she gets into sort of some of the details of the liturgy, and she just gives one tiny explanation. Most people don't even know what liturgy means or what the liturgy is. It's very interesting, and it's very deeply connected to the true meaning of what's in the Bible and how it links to the Old Testament, why the Old Testament is part of the Christian documents, which, the way that I sort of simplify it for the average person is I say, look, the Old Testament was basically 400 years prophesying the coming of Jesus. That's what it was for. But there's more to it than that. The Psalms are an essential part of Catholicism. They're an essential part of Catholicism because the Psalms essentially, throughout the liturgical year, represent various parts and seasons and so on. So, and there's different levels of reading the Bible. There is the very plain historical level, there is an allegorical level, there is a metaphorical level, and they are quite specific, and clear. They're not to be confused, and they're not confused by those people who understand these things and study these things. Chris Goves and Kurgan, what is the real number of the Spanish Inquisition? Oh, like I said, I think I've answered that. I guessed 11 witches and 123 sodomy, so I was pretty close. Yeah, you were pretty close. It's way less than I thought it was, yeah. Maybe instead of past lives, it's ancestral knowledge memories. There are a number of ways you could deal with that. So going through all the possibilities that I thought of, you could have demonic possession. I discount that one because, as I said, my experiences happened many years ago. They happened, when I was around age 26, and they kept happening for quite a while, until I was in my 30s. And they were all overwhelmingly positive. They were all related to, I met other people that had the same memories without us discussing it, or usually what happens, one person remembers and then sparks off the memories in the other person. But the thing is, like, imagine I come up to you and say, hey, you were my brother in that life where we were sailors. And all of a sudden, boom, you get all this flash of memories, and you then start to describe to me, without me having said anything, how we were dressed, what ship we were on, what the name of the ship was, who our third brother was, details I have not discussed at all. So either there's some weird demonic possession, which, like I said, that doesn't ring true, was never that sort of thing for me. And I believe I have been attacked by demonic type of entities, so I have a very clear differentiation between them. Now, being open to this sort of thing does also open you up to demonic attacks and so on. So it is, like seeing auras can do that to a certain extent. But I don't think it was that. Another thing, it could be some kind of weird retroviral telepathy. So I've got all these crazy ideas in my head. I say something to you, and somehow unconsciously I pass on all my crazy ideas into your subconscious, so that then it comes up into your consciousness, and then you confirm what is really only my crazy idea I've passed to you telepathically. Sounds pretty convoluted and more difficult than what I think is the plainest explanation. The other problem that I have with that, if it was just my crazy ideas of telepathy, they would not match historical facts that I have no way of knowing. Like, one of the things I remember, for example, was that teepees were huge. I didn't know that. I'd never been to America. The only teepees I'd ever seen were in John Wayne films when I was a little kid, and never thought about it, never spent a minute thinking about it. But when I remembered in my memory, they were huge, they were big. I was like, man, those things were like a proper room sized inside, they were big. And lo and behold, of course they were. Then I also remember specific cities. I remember specific people that lived that I knew nothing about. And when I went to that city, I went to that town in the States, when I went to travel to the States just to check if I was crazy or not, which was pretty difficult for me at the time. It was expensive, it wasn't easy. And I did. I confirmed things that I had no way of knowing. Back then the internet was pretty new. You didn't have Google, didn't exist. And I specifically didn't want to look in books and stuff, because I thought, no, that might just put in some other idea, and then I sort of come back as a memory. No. I know for a fact I don't know anything about that particular town. I'm going to go to the town and see if I remember it. And when I was in the town, I was like, shit, it's exactly what I remember. So I don't know how to explain that. And like I said, I don't think there was no negative fallback. In fact, only positive results came as a result of it. So to me, sort of makes sense. And as for the ancestral knowledge memories, again, what would be the genetic link? Because one of the memories I had, one of the lifetimes that I remembered, and I'm not going to say who or what, because it is a historical personage, not a major one, but one that there has been some stuff written about, which I'd never read or knew anything about before, by the way. That guy, definitely had no genetic link that I am aware of anywhere, certainly in the last few 100 years, I would guess. So why would I remember what that guy's genetic life is when, you know, he died sort of probably a few years into, you know, when my great grandfather was still alive. I guess they were around that same time and on completely different continents. So why the hell would I remember? Why would I know that? You know. So I don't know. Edgath de Silva says, very interesting your view on reincarnation, being part skeptical to Edgar Cayce, the sleeping prophet, because he believed in that. Well, the thing about Edgar Cayce is that he prophesied that they would find a room under the Sphinx that would reveal a whole bunch of technological stuff about the Atlanteans and so on. The reality is that that room was found and it's been bricked up, hidden, and there was metal in there, large metal objects. I know that because I met, had dinner with, and spoke to John Anthony West, who was the guy who did the seismographic tests using shotgun cells inside the ground and setting them off and reading from the seismograph waves what the material was in there, the fact that there was a chamber. And the only guy that's been in there that I know of is Zawi Hao Ass, as I like to call him, the fraudulent scumbag who runs the Giza Plateau. And apparently there was a very big metal object in there, but we don't know what it is because he's blocked it up, because he's gone in there, he's closed it off, and he's not let anybody go in there, and they're now bricking up the whole of the Sphinx to hide the fact that the Sphinx is actually 10,000 years old or more, as Robert Schoch, the geologist who proved that the Sphinx was eroded by a huge amount of rainfall, it only fell in that area of the planet when the Sahara Desert was actually a tropical jungle, which only happened around 10,000 years ago, not 5,000. And so the Sphinx certainly is a lot older than we've been told, and I believe so is the Great Pyramid, and it had nothing to do with being tombs for Egyptians. Well, we are, if fortunate, going to have a second life in purgatory, and reincarnation at Judgment Day is dogma. That's a very good point. I never even thought about that. But yeah. 7 Gnostic cultists. Aha. Yeah, I guess there were a few, hopefully a few more Gnostics were burnt. But anyway. Have you read Guy de Maupassant's short story, The Duel? Dueling sounds like a great way of punishing the Gammas and White Knights. Just the threat of it is enough. I don't know if the short story was based on one of my favorite films, which I think is called The Duelist. I'm not sure if it's related, but it was a brilliant little film. Look, personally, I'm all for dueling. It's just the Catholic Church doesn't allow it, you know. I'm thinking maybe you could modify it a little bit, like, say, to crippling injury rather than just death, you know. Because you could always duel to first blood. I mean, does that cross the line? You know, I don't know. I'm being a little bit Talmudic here and trying to argue against the dogma of the church, but there you go. Since there is no law against assholes dueling, under strict rules is needed. I'm not sure what that means, but Tommy Hill says, off to bed, thanks, okay, good night. Escat de Silva, I totally believe Cayce on the hidden chambers. There are 2 other places as well, Yucatan and Bimini. Okay, yeah, I haven't gone deeply into the Edgar Cayce stuff. I'm sort of familiar with a little bit superficially, I guess. DPM, how are something, I don't know. Grady Hooger asks, can architectural building shapes be spiritually evil? Possibly, I would presume so. You know, if you build some kind of temple to burn children in that's shaped like Moloch's bull, I would say that there's probably going to be some bad energies there. I don't know how it works, but I would guess yes. DPM says, how are they allowed to keep something under the pyramid secret? Because Zawi Hawass simply has complete dominion over that whole area, so he can do what he wants. And that's it. I think that's all the questions. I've been going for an hour, so I think that's quite a long time. I see that I have my faithful 1 thumbs down guy, so 24 thumbs up. Feel free to click some more thumbs up. it's good to know. I actually suspect I know who that perennial thumbs down on anything I do is. I actually believe I know who he is. And yeah, you're just wrong, dude. And we know that you're a bit of a homosexual. Yep. But that's okay. I like living rent-free in your brain. And Woolly Ram says, absolutely, most modern architecture is intentionally ugly and incorporates occult Gnostic patterns. There you go. So yeah, I was thinking more from a materialistic point of view, whether you can, make something be evil just by shaping it a certain way. I think the intent matters probably quite a bit. But yeah. Okay, I'm gonna give you guys another couple of minutes, let's say, to let's see if I can make any more of my ductal platypus noise while you guys think of another 2 questions. First 2 questions I'll answer. They can be as dumb as you want. If I don't want to answer, I won't, of course. Let's see what I can do with this. Probably nothing. There you go. You can tell that my duck-billed platypus call is improving even as we speak. All right, cool. I think that's the end of it. Have a good night, everybody. And I see that I think I've dropped a few people with that ending. Okay, thank you all for listening, and thanks for those of you that are buying or have bought the book. And I'll speak to you shortly. I think the live streams are going to be more often now because I've actually got the software. I've decided to buy it. And I think maybe the next thing we'll do is maybe a live stream with the Western Civilization guy. Sorry, I forgot your name, I think. But anyway, so yeah, thanks, good night, and have a good one.